of testing exploits in the end. Was that your question? Yeah. I mean, you have basically what you have transaction costs in any market. That's why it is important that the market is big. If you start with a small market, then you have the same fixed transaction costs, and you can divide it by only a small number of participants. Whereas if you start small, if you start larger, then the cost distributes almost equally, and you're very, very well off. And in the end, if you look at the assets at stake in information security, then the cost of testing should not be in any relevant size compared to the positive outcomes of vulnerability derivatives. Did I answer your question? Yeah. Speak loud, I will repeat it.
If, there we go. The question, whoa, test. The question is how, it's a bit complex. You're approaching the vulnerability society or whatever from a marketing perspective or with an economy, you're taking an economy view. What about a way of thinking that applies or is more similar to open source, or someone not wanting to be a part of more economic systems or more market-oriented economic systems in the world? I think it sounds like a good idea personally, but still, I know there are, or I can imagine that there will be doubters.
Yeah, I can imagine this as well, and I think it's a very good question. I would not call it a marketing approach, but rather a microeconomic approach. Yes, you say open source is more or less the contrary to market. And basically what I propose is more market, and we see from open source that less market is more successful. Was that your point? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
The question is if there has been any thought of going in another direction, having an organization of vulnerability,
regulation.
Regulation that is not that isn't taking an economical approach.
I mean, regulation is also a political or economical approach, and I would say even open source is an economic approach, because open source is the economic response to the monopoly on the supply side for software. Because what you have is not the free market, which I propose here, but what you have is no competition. It is basically a monopoly. It is an imperfect market, and the response to an imperfect market, like in the software sector, is giving or offering software at the market price, and the market price is zero, open source, because there are no marginal costs for software. You can redistribute different copies of software for free or for zero cost. Yep. So it's clear that the price in a competitive environment falls to zero. So I would not say that open source is the contrary to economic approaches, but it's more a creation of economic reason.
Yeah, fair enough. It doesn't necessarily have to be hung up on open source, just I think I was more interested in something else than an economical approach.
Yeah, but what is else? I mean, else means regulation, means building a government, building someone whom you trust, whom you report everything, who is tax funded, and basically you have to assume that this is not a bad guy.
I agree. The question.
And this is the alternative. Yeah, sure.
What I was throwing up in there was a question: is if there has been any work.
Yeah, the question is whether there's work. As I cited, there is this seminal work by Campbell and Jean Champ. I think she both proposed a tax disincentive. I don't know how to skip fast.
No,
they proposed a way to tax or to punish insecure nodes and to implement state regulation to get the security in order. Well, it is up to the individual belief which one is the better solution. But yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for your answer and comments anyway.
More comments and questions? Yes.
No, I want first to stress that I think you did a very good talk and you have very interesting ideas. Nevertheless, I have to nitpick at some places. The first point is I actually think that the information value of bug challenges is much better than you gave it. I hope so, because actually that is what I'm suggesting to improve security in the German Gesundheitstelematik. But we can talk if you have a better suggestion for that problem. I think so because the value of what is given as a reward if you show this bug is actually a good security measure. So if you have a bug challenge which say, well, if you find a bug in this system under these conditions, you will earn 10 million euro, then I think that is a quite strong...
Do you actually offer rewards in the range of 10 million euros? Because the rewards I know are about $500.
Yeah,
or for example, the bug auction was $60 before it has been canceled.
I'm working the other way around. I'm talking about critical infrastructure for the German medical system. And I'm working the market in this way, the other way around, because I say, if they want to put this on the citizens by doing regulation, then they have first to prove that it's secure enough, and they have to prove this by raising such a high reward for finding a bug. That is my approach, which is
if you really
reversing the sense of comparison.
I endorse this approach if you have the means to really have adequately high rewards.
No, I'm requiring.
Yeah.
Just a second. I'm requiring, before a system is introduced for all German citizens, I require that there must be a bug challenge with a very high reward.
Okay, so I think the CCC will not have any problems to finance the next Congress.
Yes, definitely, yes. Yeah. With the future market, I see some ways it can be manipulated. One would be the vendor of a software can buy all the bundles. That will cost him only the transaction cost, and he can suppress actually the market functioning.
The supply of bundles is infinitive, because everybody can issue bundles. And,
yeah, that's good.
It's not limited, no.
Yeah,
I mean, bundles are issued depending on demand. So, for example, even I showed different contracts. For example, the one for the localized version and the normal version, and you have different platforms. You have different software. So it will be a huge number of different contract bundles, and it is only controlled by demand. So everybody can issue because it's absolutely risk-free to issue this bundle. Yeah,
that's countering that approach. The other risk I would see is that if a financially strong vendor starts buying negative contracts of a competition.
Yeah, it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, he can, what is the English word? It's a kind of innuendo attack. Yeah, he's attacking the goodwill and the good name of his competition. That would be an
But he's paying a high price. He or she is paying a high price.
No, actually not, because he's more or less, if the value of these is low, which means the security fame of his competition is high, then he's paying a low price, but he has a cheap attack.
Okay. There's a contradiction, because if he or she pays a low price, it basically means it does not endanger the reputation of the competitor, because if it is a low price, that basically means there's no market impact of buying the competitor's contracts. If there is some market impact, basically what you want to do is to buy the contracts of your competitor in order to rise the price, so that the public thinks this is less secure, but then you have to pay more and more higher prices. And
I'm not talking about theory. This is happening.
Sorry, what do you mean?
Exactly.
It seems to be a rumor, then
Yeah.
That
You will always have certain level of speculation in any market, and we know that markets sometimes err, and the question is to balance the trade-offs, but it's very difficult to beat existing markets in the long run. I agree with you that in the short run there are kind of bubbles, and we will perhaps see security market bubbles. Sure, it's a disadvantage, and I don't know any mechanism to prevent this. Well, of course, perhaps more transparency and requiring certain restrictions in the market. Who knows? Sure, this is, I wouldn't call it a weak point, but it's natural with any type of market. And if the advantages outweigh the cost, then yeah.
Yeah, I still say it's a good idea, but we see effects like this in the stock market. We see
Sure.
we had seen,
Sure.
I think 2 years ago, we had exactly an attack which worked in the real stock market like
Sure.
this.
Sure, I mean, especially if the markets are concentrated, if someone has huge market power. And I think there's also, you can look in the paper, I already mentioned this problem of market imperfections, but it simply was too short in this talk to go into all details.
The third problem I see is a compensation. It should be prevented that a user of a software can overcompensate his losses, because then he has no incentive to use or to make his software installation more secure, because he would earn more if a bug is found. Yeah. If in your example he buys 40 certificates instead of 20, then he would have an advantage if a bug is found. He would earn more money with a bug than without the bug.
Yeah, but then he's entering different business. Then he or she is entering the business of vulnerability hunters. And sure, you're not forbidden to invest into failure of software. I mean, if you look at, in practice, we have, for example, weather derivatives. And that's basically what organizers of big open-air events use in order to hedge the risk of bad weather, of rain. And there you also do not forbid to buy more bad weather contracts than good weather contracts, or than required to compensate for his possible losses, because then he or she is entering different business. I mean, then he speculates on rain. Fine. Sorry, perhaps I didn't get your concern.
You claimed that the derivatives are quite good at giving an incentive to make software secure.
Yes.
And on a basic level, I understand that. But the derivative, actually, you can earn money with it when you know more about the security level, when you know more than the public knows.
Exactly.
That's when you can really earn money with it.
Exactly.
That would mean if I'm a programmer in such a company, I would build in a difficult to detect backdoor, which
Okay.
I know. And that's, of course, not helping security, you know.
That's why I propose to use it as part of compensation. And of course, yes, there are dangers of conflicts of interest, because this is nothing else than a typical conflict of interest. But we have this type of conflicts of interest in any market that is existing right now. And we know how sort of dealing with. Sure, there may be imperfections as well. But I think we have a huge tradition and experience in dealing with conflicts of interest within a company.
But you agree that the scenario would work?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, you can also read on this in the paper, so it's already covered. Yeah. That was the last question? Okay, thank you very much.